Florida's home insurance market is in crisis. In April, a monthly index of rent increases led by 3 universities found Florida accounted for 8 of the nation's top 10 markets with the biggest rent increases year over year. Fort Myers was the largest, rising 32% year over year. Northport, Sarasota, Bradenton was also in the top 10 in the country at 30.88%. Others in the top 10 include Miami, Tampa, Orlando, Lakeland, and Melbourne. And this has become a big election issue with the Governor Ron DeSantis, and Senator Marco Rubio running for re-election. I spoke with Florida Commissioner of Agriculture and Democratic gubernatorial candidate Nikki Fried about her plan to combat rising property insurance and rent in the state.
First and foremost, we say on day one of a Fried administration, we are declaring a housing emergency. This allows us to immediately take resources out of our reserves, start putting it towards building more affordable homes, which has been gutted every single session since the start of Jeb Bush, in the tune of $2.3 billion. Why do we think we have a housing shortage? Because affordable housing hasn't been built. And that means both Jeb and Charlie and Rick and Ron have all gutted it. So that's first and foremost. We start building more homes. Also making sure that when we have a state of emergency, that I'll be able to allow the Attorney General and state attorneys across the state to start going after these individuals who are predatory landlords in our state, increasing our homestead exemption from $50,000 to $100,000. This will be the largest tax cut in Florida's history, and it's going to happen under a Fried administration.
If anybody wants to talk about affordable housing in Florida, they have to become accustomed to the Sadowski Fund. And you know, you talked about the sweeps to it and how there's been less money that can actually be allocated. I believe now it's a 9.7%, but the promise now is that it won't be swept in the future. You have promised to. Okay, so first question is, do you believe that? Okay, and second, just based on your reaction. And second, how can we get the legislature then to increase that number instead of level it?
Yeah, first of all, I don't believe them. They have been saying that for 20 years and it hasn't happened. And they continue to say it even this past legislative session. And so what they did was, oh, we're not gutting it. We are moving it. They took $100 million and moved it over to create this heroes trust account of some sort, so that basically first time homeowners that are, I think, first responders and teachers could buy a home. But when you break down the amount of money, it's like equated to like 9,000 people. And so those are only people that are going to be able to be helped. And it's not about building homes. And great that we can help them with their down payment, but if they can't afford the house going forward, then it completely is a waste of time. I will not sign a budget that touches a single cent from the Sadowski Fund. And let me tell you, we have reserves because of the amount of money that came down from the federal government during this pandemic. So as Ron DeSantis wants to keep talking about inflation and blaming it on Biden and blaming it on Washington, D.C., he's very happy to take these large checks and hand them out for political favors and not recognizing and not acknowledging that that money is coming from Washington, D.C., which also allowed them to put more money into reserves because all this money was coming down from the federal government.
I can't tell you the amount of times I've heard some viewers and just some normal conversation I have with them on the traffic on the Suncoast that you've probably noticed here. Well, they'll tell me, you know, they just put up an apartment, 96 people, but we still have the same road. So now we have X amount more cars.
Right. And part of the problem is that we used to have a statewide coordinating committee that basically used to create the roadmap for expansion in our state. They would pull in your local governments in the areas where you're starting to see the growth and where people are moving to. But when you're doing this hodgepodge approach and local governments are not as much as seats at the table, you have, okay, well, we're going to go sell this farmland and to a developer, and they're going to develop, another, 1,500 acres. But yet they're not talking to local governments saying, wait a second, we need to make sure that there's a right amount of food stores, that they're not creating a food desert, that you're not creating an area where there is no access to all of these other different services that are necessary. But when you have a governor who is understanding that we've got to look at the state in totality, where are people moving to? I mean, even, you're right, I'm from Miami-Dade.
Commissioner Fried is running in the Democratic primary for Florida governor. Charlie Crist is her opponent. We'll have part 2 of our interview coming up on the weekend edition at 6:30.